September 3rd, 1972, 3:18 p.m. The Gold's Gym on Pacific Avenue in Venice Beach radiated the particular atmosphere of serious strength training. Iron clanging against iron, chalk dust hanging in the air like fine snow, and the deep, rhythmic breathing of athletes pushing against their physical limits. The temperature inside had climbed past 85 degrees, despite open doors on both ends and 3 oscillating fans positioned at strategic intervals throughout the facility. 19 people occupied the gym that Sunday afternoon, most focused intensely on their individual training sessions, until a conversation near the squat rack drew everyone's attention and transformed what had been a routine workout session into something none of the witnesses would forget, though most would struggle to adequately explain it to people who weren't there. The man making the statement stood 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighed 293 pounds, every ounce of it functional muscle built through 15 years of dedicated Olympic weightlifting competition at the highest international levels. Viktor Konstantin, age 31, had represented the Soviet Union at the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City, finishing 4th in the super heavyweight division, with a combined total of 580 kilograms across the snatch and clean and jerk disciplines. He'd defected in 1970 during a competition in West Germany and eventually settled in Los Angeles, where he trained private clients and prepared for international competitions under the American flag. His hands, when he gripped a barbell loaded with competition plates, made the standard 45-pound plates look like children's toys. When he spoke, his accent carried the weight of Moscow winters and Soviet training halls, where weakness meant elimination from the program. Bruce Lee sat on a flat bench 15 feet away, toweling sweat from his face and neck after completing a demanding circuit of isometric holds and dynamic tension exercises that he'd developed specifically for martial arts conditioning. He was 31 years old, 5'7", 141 pounds, and had come to Gold's at the invitation of Dorian Yates, a bodybuilder friend who believed Bruce would benefit from observing how serious strength athletes structured their training programs and approached progressive overload. Bruce wore simple black shorts and a grey tank top, his physique lean and defined in a way that emphasized speed, mobility, and functional athleticism rather than maximum muscle mass. Beside him sat Chuck Norris, who'd been training with Bruce for 18 months and had suggested the gym visit as a way to explore different training methodologies and learn from practitioners of other physical disciplines. The conversation had started innocuously enough, the way most significant confrontations begin, without anyone recognizing their eventual importance. Victor had been coaching a client through proper deadlift form and technique when he noticed Bruce performing what looked like rapid precision strikes against a heavy bag positioned near the free weight area. The speed was undeniable. Bruce's hands created visible blur patterns in the air, his strikes landing with staccato rhythm that sounded like a drum roll or machine gun fire. Victor watched for approximately 30 seconds, his professional interest engaged, before setting down the clipboard he'd been using to track his client's sets and approaching Bruce directly. "Impressive speed," Victor said, approaching Bruce directly with the confidence of someone used to speaking his mind without social niceties. His English was heavily accented, but clear and precise. Very fast hands, like hummingbird wings beating in the air. But speed without power is just noise, just movement without consequence. You hit heavy bag and barely moves at all. In real fight, you need power. You need to break opponent, not just touch him quickly. Bruce stopped his striking drill and turned to face Victor. "Power comes in different forms," he said evenly. "Breaking boards and moving heavy bags looks impressive, but the question is whether that kind of power transfers to actual combat, where targets are moving and defensive." Victor smiled, the expression containing no hostility, but absolute certainty born from years of quantifiable strength training. "I have lifted 247 kilograms over my head. That is power. Real, measurable power. Your speed is skill, yes, but against real strength, skill has limits. You hit me with your fastest punch, I would not even feel it through my muscle. You are all speed, no power." The gym had gone quiet. Dorian Yates stopped mid-curl. Chuck Norris stood from the bench he'd been using. The 19 people present all recognized the moment for what it was. not malicious confrontation, but genuine philosophical disagreement between practitioners of fundamentally different physical disciplines. Victor believed power meant moving maximal resistance through space. Bruce believed power meant applying force with precision to vulnerable targets at optimal timing. "Would you like to test that theory?" Bruce asked, his voice quiet but carrying perfectly in the suddenly silent gymnasium. Victor looked genuinely curious rather than aggressive. "You want to punch me? To show your power?" "I want to demonstrate that power isn't just about muscle mass and maximum lifting capacity," Bruce replied. "If you're willing, I'll show you what happens when speed and precision combine with proper body mechanics. But I need your consent, and I need you to understand there's a difference between demonstration and combat." Victor gestured to an open area of the gym floor, away from equipment. "Show me. I am interested to see what martial arts power looks like compared to strength training power. But please, use your full force. I have been hit many times in training. I will tell you honestly if I feel your power." They moved to the clear space, and the other 18 people in the gym formed a loose circle, witness to what would become a defining moment in how they understood the relationship between different types of physical capability. Chuck Norris stepped closer, ready to intervene if the demonstration escalated beyond its intended parameters. Dorian Yates positioned himself where he could see both men clearly, his expression mixing fascination with concern. "Where would you like me to hit you?" Bruce asked. "This needs to be somewhere you can absorb impact safely, but also accurately assess the force." Victor considered, then tapped his solar plexus, the area just below his sternum where the diaphragm sat beneath layers of abdominal muscle. "Here, I have strong core, very developed. If your power is real, I will feel it even through muscle. If your power is just speed, it will be like a tap." Bruce nodded and took a position approximately 3 feet from Victor. He didn't assume any classical martial arts stance, just stood naturally, his weight centered, his hands relaxed at his sides. "I'm going to demonstrate 3 different strikes. Same target, same basic technique, but 3 different applications of power. The first will be pure speed, what you think I'm limited to. The second will combine speed with body mass transfer. The third will be the full application of what I call focused force. Ready?" Victor crossed his arms over his chest, leaving his solar plexus exposed. His abdominal muscles were clearly visible, even through the tank top he wore, ridged and dense from years of heavy squats and Olympic lifting. "I am ready. Please, full power. Do not hold back because you think I cannot handle it." The first strike came exactly as Bruce described. Pure speed. His fists snapped forward in a straight line, covering the 3 feet of distance in what witnesses later estimated was less than 1/10 of a second, and tapped Victor's solar plexus before retracting just as quickly. The strike looked impossibly fast, but Victor's expression didn't change. "I felt it," Victor said honestly. "But you are right, that is just touching quickly. No real power. Like you said, just speed. Show me the next one." The second strike incorporated what Bruce had learned from boxing and fencing footwork. He stepped forward as his fist extended, adding his body mass to the strike, his rear leg pushing off the ground to drive his weight into Victor's core. The impact was different this time, more solid, and Victor's expression shifted fractionally, his eyes narrowing. "Better," Victor acknowledged. "That one I felt more. You are using body weight, not just arm. But still, through my muscle, it is not so much. Your body is 141 pounds. My body is 293 pounds. Even with good technique, your mass cannot generate force like heavy mass can. Show me the third." Bruce reset his position, but this time something changed in his demeanor. The casual demonstration atmosphere shifted to something more serious. Not aggressive, but intensely focused. "This one will be different," he said. "I need you to tell me immediately if it's too much. This isn't about proving anything. It's about demonstrating a principle." Victor uncrossed his arms, his natural defensive instinct recognizing that whatever was coming was different from the first 2 strikes. "I am ready," he said, though his tone had changed, the absolute certainty replaced by cautious curiosity. What happened in the next second and a half would be analyzed and debated by the 19 witnesses for years afterward. Bruce didn't step forward this time. He sank his weight, dropped his center of gravity perhaps 2 inches, and his entire body became connected, feet rooted to the floor, legs engaged, hips coiled, torso wound like a spring, shoulder loaded, arm extended but relaxed. Then everything released simultaneously. The strike covered 3 feet of distance, but it wasn't distance that mattered. It was the wave of force that traveled from Bruce's rear foot through his skeletal structure and explosive out through his fist into Victor's solar plexus. The sound was different from the first 2 strikes. Not a tap, not a thud, but something between a crack and a thump that made several witnesses flinch. Whoomp. Victor's eyes went wide. His diaphragm spasmed, his breath expelled in an involuntary gasp, and his hands flew to his core as he stumbled backward 3 steps before his shoulders hit the wall behind him. He slid down to a sitting position, his face showing shock and something that might have been fear, gasping like someone who'd had the wind knocked out of them by unexpected impact. Bruce was beside him immediately, kneeling. Breathe slow, in through your nose. Your diaphragm seized. It'll pass in about 20 seconds. You're not injured, just shocked. The gym erupted in motion. Chuck Norris moved to Victor's other side. Dorian Yates grabbed a water bottle. The other 16 people pressed closer, everyone talking at once, asking if Victor was okay, asking what just happened, asking if they'd really seen what they thought they'd seen. Victor waved them back, still breathing hard, but his color was returning to normal. After approximately 30 seconds, he could speak. "What?" he gasped. "What was that? That was not like the first 2. That was..." He struggled for the English word, then settled on, "That was inside power, not on surface, inside." Bruce helped him to his feet. That's the difference between force and power. The first strike was force applied to surface tissue. The second was force applied with body mass behind it. The third was power, which means force applied with timing, structure, and intention, so it penetrates rather than dissipates at the surface. Your abdominal muscles are incredibly strong, but muscle can't protect against force that's already moving through it before the muscle realizes it needs to contract. Victor stood fully, his hand still pressed against his solar plexus, and looked at Bruce with an expression that combined respect with something approaching awe. "I have been hit in training many times, heavy bags, sparring, even once in fight in Moscow. Never like that. How? You weigh 141 pounds. I am 293 pounds. You should not be able to generate force that affects me." "Because you're measuring the wrong variable," Bruce replied. "You're measuring static mass. But power in combat isn't about how much you weigh. It's about how much force you can generate and deliver to a specific point at a specific moment. You can lift 247 kilograms overhead, which requires tremendous strength. But that's strength against gravity, against predictable resistance, over a measured distance. Combat power is about defeating the body's defensive mechanisms through precision and timing." Victor was listening with the intensity of someone having foundational assumptions challenged by direct experience. "Show me again, but slower. I want to understand the mechanics." What followed was a 40-minute session that transformed the gym into an impromptu biomechanics classroom. Bruce broke down the strike into its components. The foot position that allowed force to travel through the skeletal structure. The hip rotation that added mass to the movement without telegraphing. The shoulder mechanics that kept the arm relaxed until the final microsecond of impact. The fist position that focused force into a concentrated point. Victor asked technical questions with the precision of someone used to analyzing physical movement. How much of the power came from legs versus upper body? What role did breathing play in force generation? Why did relaxation produce more power than tension? Bruce answered each question while demonstrating, sometimes on Victor, sometimes on the heavy bag, showing how the same principles applied regardless of target. Then Victor asked the question that would lead to the most significant insight of the afternoon. "Can this be trained? Can someone with my body type learn this, or is it only for people with your build?" "It can absolutely be trained," Bruce said. "In fact, someone with your strength base would potentially generate even more power than I do once you understand the mechanics. You already know how to recruit maximum muscle fibers and generate force against resistance. You just need to learn how to apply that force efficiently in combat context." Victor's eyes lit up. "You would teach me?" If you're genuinely interested, yes, Bruce replied. But it means temporarily setting aside some assumptions about what constitutes power. Are you willing to do that? 2 months later, Victor began training at Bruce's school in Los Angeles 3 times per week, balancing his Olympic lifting preparation with learning to apply his tremendous strength through martial arts mechanics. His training log from that period shows a fascinating evolution. His maximum lifts remained consistent, or even improved, but his striking power, measured through sophisticated testing equipment Bruce had access to, increased by 47% over 8 weeks, despite no increase in muscle mass. The witnesses at Gold's Gym that September afternoon each incorporated what they'd seen into their own training philosophies. Dorian Yates began studying biomechanics more seriously, looking for ways to make his bodybuilding training more functionally applicable. Chuck Norris refined his own striking techniques based on Bruce's demonstration, later teaching similar principles to his students. The other 16 people present, ranging from amateur bodybuilders to casual gym-goers, all remembered the day they learned that power and strength, while related, were not synonymous. Gold's Gym on Pacific Avenue eventually moved locations, then closed entirely in the 1990s. The specific spot where Victor sat against the wall, gasping for breath and reconsidering his entire understanding of power, is now part of a retail storefront that sells athletic apparel. None of the current employees know that in September 1972, 19 people witnessed a redefinition of physical capability. Victor Constantin never competed in the Olympics for the United States. Political complications with his defection status prevented his participation in the 1972 Munich Games. But he continued training and eventually became one of the most sought-after strength coaches in Los Angeles, working with martial artists, football players, and anyone seeking to understand how different types of power could be integrated and optimized. When he died in 2001, his obituary mentioned his Olympic career and his coaching legacy, but made no reference to the afternoon that changed how he understood force generation. The phrase, "You're all speed, no power," became something the 19 witnesses remembered as example of how expertise in one domain doesn't automatically translate to understanding other domains. Victor had been absolutely correct that Bruce weighed 141 pounds and couldn't match Victor's ability to move heavy resistance through space. Victor had been absolutely wrong that this limitation meant Bruce couldn't generate significant power in combat application. The demonstration lasted 5 seconds. The education that followed lasted 40 minutes. But the principle demonstrated that power comes in forms beyond what scales and barbells measure, continued influencing training methodologies decades after that September afternoon. Perhaps the real lesson wasn't about comparing weightlifting power to martial arts power. The real lesson was Victor's response to having his assumptions challenged through direct experience. He didn't defend his position or dismiss the evidence. He asked to learn more. He incorporated new information into his existing expertise. He recognized that being proven wrong about one thing didn't invalidate everything else he knew, just expanded his understanding of how different physical capabilities interrelate. That's not about martial arts versus strength training, speed versus power, or east versus west. That's about intellectual honesty and the willingness to adjust worldview when confronted with evidence that contradicts established belief. Victor came to Gold's Gym that day as one of the strongest humans in California. He left understanding that strength and power, while related, required different measurement systems and different training approaches. The witnesses saw what happened when 2 experts from different disciplines engaged in honest exchange rather than territorial defense. They saw demonstration transform into education. They saw ego subordinate itself to curiosity. And they learned that the most powerful response to being proven wrong isn't defensiveness, but show me how that works. 5 seconds changed Victor's understanding. 40 minutes changed his training approach. 2 months changed his capabilities. And the principle underlying all of it, that expertise means continuing to learn, especially from people whose methods seem to contradict your own, remained relevant long after the specific demonstration faded from memory. Perhaps that is enough.